Hi, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chat for today. It's our 250th session. It's October 9th, 2025, and we have been here since May 2020, and it's kind of an exciting thing. Today is a core topic, which means we repeat it every year. It is on contracts, a popular session because hopefully, a lot of us are starting up new contracts right now. If you're in the United States, the fiscal year for the federal government, well, the federal government's shut down right now, but fiscal year for the federal government ends September 30th. So a lot of things happen at the end of the fiscal year in September, and so some of us start new contracts right about that time. Um, anyway, so contracts seem to be pretty popular this time of year, so we do this same session every year. But since we're on our 250th session, I wanted to throw some statistics at you. I put these together this morning. We have had 250 sessions, so I'm going to throw some numbers. We've had 20,262 lifetime registrations, and that doesn't even include today. Of course, not all those people show up. We have 1,239 individual registrations, but if you have registered under several emails, that's probably 50 of Joe Travers' different emails he's had over the years. But I don't know. Actually, I don't know if Joe's ever had more than one email, but some of you guys have about 10 or 15 different emails. But we are probably over 1,100 different individuals who've been involved. 217, that's the most session registrations by, and she's here today, Ann Price. And that's the registrations. She didn't show up 217 times, but in 2022, in July, I decided I should actually pay attention to who's actually showing up. So since July of 2022, the person who's attended the most, which is 150 times, is Jessica Metcalf or Jessie Metcalf. 25 and 63. 25 is the average attendance back in September of 2022, and today the average attendance is 63. So today's session is a little bit lower, but on average, we're having, between 40 and 80 people showing up to these things. 89, that is the largest session attendance, and that happened just, I don't know, 3 weeks ago with Vishaka Ramakrishnan on her AI presentation. A couple more statistics for you here. Average registrations and attendees by quarter. You can see in 2022, I started tracking how many people are actually showing up. Something happened right around here, maybe around January, February, which caused some changes. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe you guys know. But right now we have about 159 registrations per week and about 50 people who show up in this quarter anyway. Total registrations and attendees by year. And I want to say in the 2025, this is so far, we still have another 2.5 months to go. But we've seen growth in registrations and attendees total number per year. And I like this next statistic because it's really interesting. How many people were engaged without replication? What's the number of people I think who have been engaged with our IC topic chats in a period of a year? So if 146 people were involved in 2022 and those 146 people came back in 2023, that they may be included there. But people engaged without replication, we're up to about 320 people this year alone. So I think we're making a splash, which is kind of exciting. All right. Did you forget something? Oh, yeah, that's right. We're here to talk about contracts, not about the IC topic chat. So one thing before we get into the contracts, as I do every year, I want everybody to know I am not a lawyer. Take what I have to say with a grain of salt. You should absolutely work with a lawyer. I work with a contract lawyer for all of our contracts to make sure we do things appropriately, legally, that it is considerate of my needs and protects my company, but also creates a fair contract that's going to promote whatever I'm trying to do. What is a contract? And I'll let you read this, but basically, as you're reading this, it's a document that protects your rights. It lays everything out. It gives you an opportunity to say, here's what I will do, here's what I won't do, here's who I am, here's who I'm not, here's what happens when things go right and go wrong, here's how you're going to pay me, here's what I intend to do. It's but Wikipedia has a better definition than me. Why do we do it? It's dictating expectations. So what should they expect from you? What should you expect from them? Obviously, you're expecting that they're going to provide in an evaluation context, you're going to be you'll have access to collect or receive data. Usually, you're going to have interaction with individuals. So those are some types of expectations. They're going to expect that you complete reports or analyses or presentations on a schedule. It's clarifying that financial relationship, meaning you will pay me for my work. Here's when you'll pay me. Here's how you'll pay me. Um, Protects you in the event there is litigation, meaning if there's if there is litigation, you understand how it will happen. It's not insurance, but it lays it out for you. One of the things that we're always interested in as contractors, we are not employees, and so it identifies you as a contractor, and oftentimes it will go through those different pieces of how you are a contractor and not an employee. You aren't working hourly, you aren't dictated to work in a specific location or at a specific time. You are using your own tools, those sorts of things. Provides starts and end dates, and it provides reference to what you're supposed to do in the event of scope creep, which is often the thing we say, scope creep, that phrase. That's not in the contract. What you're asking me to do is not something I'm contracted to do. I'm happy to revise the contract and add that to it, obviously for an additional cost. Scope creep, whole different topic. Certainly it happens all the time. But if you want to try and avoid it, or if you find yourself in a position, you have a contract to go back to. There's different types of contracts. A verbal and implicit contract. Hey, could you do this thing? I'll pay you later for it. You may be happy to do that. There's probably nothing there. Some people would call this, we agreed on a handshake or something like that. If things go awry, you probably don't have anything to go back to. You can't sue a person based upon a verbal contract. You may still do them, but that's probably not a good, ongoing practice. You might have a signed proposal where somebody says, I like you, I like what you do. Can you put together a proposal? And you learn some more about them and you write up a proposal and you send it to them and they sign it. And so that is also not necessarily legal. It's just something that's an intent to do something. We like what you had to say. We're going to put together a contract around these sorts of things. And so the contract comes after the proposal. Sometimes there's a letter of agreement or a memorandum of agreement, MOU. You'll hear these acronyms, LOA or MOU, which are kind of a pseudo contract. And I'll make sure in the chat, and if you're watching this through YouTube, feel free to email me that I'll share an example of a memorandum of agreement or I'm sorry, it's a memorandum of understanding. I got it misspelled in there. An MOU. I'm happy to share that with you. But these are pseudo contracts. Oftentimes, you're not at that point of contracting, particularly with a big university or something like that. You might find that the process of contracting is going to take a while. Sometimes this can take months, but you want to put something in place that you know you're on the same page, and so you know you're going to get to that point of a contract. I also use MOUs when people reach out to me and say, hey, we'd like to write this proposal that's going to go to this big government agency. We want to write you in. And so that's fine. I like that. In fact, that's a major piece of how we develop our business. But what I like to do is put together an MOU in advance that says, I'm going to do these things like prepare an evaluation section that might be 3 to 5 pages for your proposal. Here's some different things that I will do. And our expectation is that you will put together a budget for X amount of dollars, which we assume would be, it could be between like 25 and 50 or 15 and 25 or whatever. and that you'll honor honor the you'll provide us with a contract once you receive, confirmation of, once you receive the grant, those sorts of things we would put in there. Now, the things we're primarily going to be talking about today are not the MOUs or the signed proposals or the other thing. We're going to be talking mostly about those contracts that either you receive from a client or you give to a client. Oftentimes, if the client is paying you, they want to use their instrument, their contract. And so I'm going to talk through some of those things that you're going to see and what you should pay attention to. And then this has happened just this week. We had a client reach out to us and say they used our MOU from when we wrote a proposal, and they turned it into their own MOU, which was kind of handy. And they said, well, why don't you sign this and we'll use this for a contract? And I said, wait a second, I think there's more we need to put into this for the contract than just what was in the MOU. I'd like to have some protections. What is our relationship with one another? How do we break off our relationship if something goes wrong? If there's a lawsuit, where is it going to be filed? These sorts of things. So we ended up giving them our contract, and they seemed to be okay with that approach, which is nice because I understand our instrument. And I think it's fair to both parties. There's a whole bunch of contracting sections. I'm going to go through some of these on the next slide, but this just is kind of an illustration of how many different types of things, and this is probably even a fraction of the sorts of things that can be in different kinds of contracts. There's as many different kinds of contracts as there are people. Contracts are not uniform. You'll hear people say that there's a template that they use or something similar, and there may be some element of similarity for different types of contracts, but when you get into it, you'll realize there are different things that jump out at you. The Goshen consulting template has these sorts of things. So the services that we'll provide, what kind of compensation or an invoice schedule. So those are usually at the end. What are the expenses that are going to be paid? Perhaps we have travel expenses. What are those things that are going to be put in there? What is the term of the contract? Is this going to be a 1 year? Is it a 5-year contract? What happens when we terminate? How do we terminate our relationship? Those are really important things because I've received contracts from clients that say they can terminate a contract with me with 30 days, but then they don't put anything in there about how I can terminate with them. Like there's a reason to think that this is a two-way street here. You're not just giving me a contract. We have a contract with one another. So that's something I usually look at. When it says relationship, that's our relationship as a contractor to a client versus an employee to an employer. So that's where that would be. What are your intellectual property rights? Perhaps you have none. Perhaps you want to protect your papers. And these are things you want to think about. And that may be laid out in there. We usually list out that the intellectual property, the data that we collect are the clients. The reports that we provide are the clients, but our working papers are ours. How did we develop those analyses? The process for the analysis is owned by Goshen. And that's the way we like to put that out there. There's different types of representations and warranties. Indemnification, meaning what are you protected from? What are they protected from us? Typically, in their indemnification, they'll have insurance requirements for that you will need, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Confidentiality, super important, particularly from them to us. We would write in there whatever we do will be confidential and that we operate within IRB training and things like that. Non-solicitation, we are not going to solicit your employees to leave and work with us, and we would not like you to solicit and try and attract our employees away from us. That's in those contracts. So they can't try and recruit our consultants to come work for them. How do you assign this? This is important. If you are done with the contract, but the contract's not over, can it get moved to another person? And usually there's a process for how you would do that. How do you provide notices to one another? Who do you do that? So there's usually something in the that says Matt Feldman, Goshen Consulting. Here's my phone number. Here's my address. Here's the best way to contact me, and you would ask for that too. And let me tell you a quick side story on that. When I was about 26, 27, I lived in this house in Washington, D.C. with two roommates, and we signed this contract. None of us really knew what we were doing. Ironically, one of the people that I lived with was a lawyer, and he didn't know what he was doing either. But the air conditioning went out, and it was summer and it was hot, and we were all sleeping above the covers with fans on us, and we kept calling the landlord, and she never called us back. So we finally moved out, and we didn't pay the last month's rent because we figured that was fair. She could just keep the deposit, um, because she never fixed the air conditioning. So then she sued us, and we ended up getting into a process where we went to a mediator, and the mediator sided with her, and he says, "Well, you didn't pay attention to the notices because you weren't supposed to be calling her. You were supposed to be calling this other person who would have fixed it for you. So you owe her all this money." And I was like, that was a lesson learned right there. The notices are important. So if you have a problem, who are you supposed to contact? And if you contact that person and they don't follow up, then there's a problem. But the notices are important. And oftentimes I will pick up on the fact that when we send a contract out to our clients, they may not fill out that notices thing. They just go to the bottom and sign it and say, "Hey, this is fine." The notices are important because you need to know who to contact in case there's a problem. How do you modify or waiver or create a waiver? How do you modify your contract? Or do you say, well, how do we hold off on this contract for a period of time? That might be a section. Who governs this contract? So if I produce a contract, I produce it in Madison County, Illinois, which is where I am currently. The courthouse is across the street from me in Edwardsville, Illinois. Usually, if a client is giving you money, they want the governing law to happen in their location, and I will be okay with that. I try and fight if I'm hiring somebody as a subcontractor or under our other program, the STEM Camp program, the governing law, I want it to be in Madison County because I basically, that's a way of kind of pushing off any problems that could potentially happen. Because nobody really wants to try and file a lawsuit in Madison County if they're in, Yuma, Arizona or something. And then finally, the acceptance. That's where people sign at the bottom. There's lots of ways to do contracts. I typically do it, um, create it in like Microsoft Word. We turn it into a PDF and we create signature lines. There's lots of contract software where the Microsoft document can be formed into different things. And I get these all the time and get different accounts that I sign up and I get to sign it through that. My process is still stays pretty similar and pretty simple. All right, let's get to the point where we talk about those 5.5 contract sections that I focus on. If somebody sends me a contract, and before I sign it, the things I look at are insurance requirements. The things that I primarily pay attention to are how much insurance do they think we need? Do we need professional liability insurance? Frequently, and we have, I think it's a $3 million total policy, 1 million per incident. And if it's going to be more than that, that would be crazy because we never use it for anything. But sometimes it does. I will ask for it to be changed. Most of you should be paying attention to workmen's or workers' compensation policies because if you're a one-person operation, you can't get workers liability uh, for injuries, because you are a one-person operation. You can't protect yourself against um, having a fall or a problem on the job. That's impossible. Another thing I pay attention to, they often will require auto insurance. And if you never intend to be on site, you don't need auto insurance because you're not going to be driving there. And that's usually auto insurance for when you're on like a large campus, like a university campus. I've still had to get it for places I never go to because they insist on it, but whatever. I usually try and fight it. And this is another thing to know. You can ask for revisions to your contracts. Um, Earlier this week, we had a contract come through that was just like, can you review this to make sure it's fine before we send it into the system for signatures? And so we looked at it. It was in a Microsoft Word document, and we didn't have any problems with it. We sent it back, but that's a very considerate thing to do to send the contract in advance of signature. All right, insurance requirements, pay attention and make sure that that's applicable. Process for termination. We have an institution that large major university, big football location. I won't say the name of the institution, but they didn't allow a process for me to terminate a contract with them. They only had a process for how they would terminate with me. And I thought that's not going to work. And so I held that contract up for a couple of months because we can't sign this. Like if I don't want to work with these people anymore, I need a process for terminating this contract. And they were okay with it. So I look at that because I think it's kind of unfair, to think you're the big organization and I'm the contractor and I don't have any rights. Well, I should have a right to terminate the contract as well. I suppose I could just stop work on it and say, I'm going to stop working on this and they would stop paying me. But I don't know. I feel like it should be laid out in the document. Who owns your work? And I think that's an important thing to look for. And I talked about this already. That intellectual property, like I said, we usually um, say the data, the reports, all of that is the client's. However, our working papers, the way we operate, those are our hours, the process for developing all of that. They don't own, they can't own my process, but they can own the final product and they can own the input. Statement of work. So, clearly you put together a statement of work at some point. Perhaps it was in a proposal that you wrote to the client, or it was a proposal that you wrote with the client, maybe for a big project and you're kind of a piece of the bigger puzzle. That statement of work gets placed directly, usually in an appendix or at the end of a contract for us. And then the invoice process and schedule is usually there with it. And then, of course, that is the most important piece. You want to make sure you know how you're going to get paid for the work that you're going to do. All right, so that's our session. We have upcoming sessions. I put all the rest of them in here. Next week, we're going to have TIG leadership. At least I need to reconfirm that. I know Naima's here, so I'll make sure I chat with her. And Nathan's been very good about that as well. We will have an IC evaluator view, which is the panel sessions we do, connecting with current clients for future work. Several of our regulars have decided to do that. I'm going to do some sort of a crazy Halloween special in a couple weeks. It's a big deal here in Edwardsville, which is also known as Eville, Illinois. So you can read the rest of these for yourself. Definitely want to pay attention in November 20th. Becky Garrow rapid fire FAQs. That's always a lot of fun. I have not published this. I haven't talked about it, and I need to start getting on it. But in 2 months, we need to do Meet the Pros because that kind of escaped my attention. I was going to do a top 10 list for that day, but for the last day of the year, let's do a Meet the Pros. So if you're interested in hosting a room, I want you guys to talk to me. Send me an email, send me a chat, something like that with your ideas because we need to fill up 7 or 8 rooms for the day. And that's usually one of the most popular sessions of the year. So if you haven't been here for that before, you'll love it. You'll come back for that. And if you've done it before and you'd like to step into the pros spot where you host a session, I would welcome your involvement. It's definitely a crazy time. You say the same thing over and over and over again, like 8 times. But you really know your material, and it's kind of fun to see people come in and have a different experience each time. Kind of like being a stand-up comedian doing the same show, but you're doing it in 2 hours and you're doing it like 7 or 8 times. So, all right. With that, I'm gonna find where everything is, but I'm going to stop the recording. If you're out there on YouTube land, we'll see you later. If you're live in person right now, stick around.